The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the overgrown path that led to the house. Lucas stood at the rusted gate, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. The mansion in front of him, hidden by centuries of neglect, stood as an eerie relic of the past. Its windows were boarded, the door itself seemed barely functional, creaking at the slightest touch. He checked the map on his phone again, confirming the location with a frown. This was it, the place marked with an X in the old journal he'd found. A whisper of wind rustled the leaves, and then, was it his imagination? Or were there voices coming from inside the house? They sounded faint, distant, but undeniably there. "Just the wind," Lucas muttered to himself. Yet, despite his words, an inexplicable feeling of dread settled deep in his chest. Lucas' breath caught as the front door creaked open with a slow, grinding sound. The whispers had grown louder, now almost distinct, pleading, desperate. "Help us." The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he hesitated. Was it real? Or was the house playing tricks on him? The wind had shifted, becoming colder, as if the house itself exhaled a chill to welcome him. Despite his growing unease, Lucas felt a magnetic pull to step inside. "It's just an old house," he whispered to himself, his voice barely a whisper in the still air. The door groaned once more as he reached for it, pushing it open with a creak that echoed like a distant scream. Inside, the house was as cold as the wind outside, its silence broken only by the soft creaks of the wood beneath his boots. Dust filled the air, and the smell of mildew was heavy. The floorboards groaned with every step he took, the weight of history pressing down on him. As Lucas moved deeper into the entryway, he found a small table cluttered with old yellowing books, their covers torn. His eyes scanned the room, but his mind couldn't shake the feeling that someone, was watching him. "Hello?" he called, his voice breaking the silence. No answer. Just the whispering again, now louder, closer. "Why are you here?" The sound of a door creaking open somewhere in the house sent a jolt of fear through Lucas' body. He froze, straining his ears to catch any sounds. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving only the soft sound of the wind outside. His gaze turned to the staircase ahead of him, dark and foreboding. He could have sworn he saw movement at the top of the stairs, something that wasn't quite human. A chill swept over him as his instincts screamed at him to leave, but his curiosity overpowered the fear. Taking a deep breath, he ascended the stairs, each step creaking underfoot. At the top, there was a door, slightly ajar, as though waiting for him. Lucas' hand trembled as he reached for the door at the top of the stairs. The whispers returned, now frantic, urging him to turn back. No, not that way. The voice was faint, but it was unmistakable. He hesitated, his hand hovering just above the door handle. The air around him seemed to grow colder, his breath visible in the dim light. Finally, the pull of the unknown was too much, and he pushed the door open. Inside, the room was empty, save for an old chair that had clearly been abandoned for years. Dust sat heavy on everything, but there in the center of the room was a book, its pages flipped open, as though waiting for someone to read it. The book lay on the floor, its pages seemingly turning of their own accord, as if guided by invisible hands. Lucas stared down at it, his mind reeling from the eerie pull it had over him. His fingers twitched, unable to resist the temptation to pick it up. As he flipped through the yellowed pages, he found strange symbols, sketches of human figures with hollow, empty eyes, and ominous shapes that seemed to swirl and distort with every passing page. A shiver ran down his spine as the drawings moved, like they were alive, reacting to his presence. With each new page, the whispers grew louder, turning into frantic voices. "You must stop," they warned, but Lucas couldn't tear himself away. This was no ordinary book. It felt like a map, not just of the house, but of something far darker buried deep within. Something that had been waiting to be uncovered. Lucas felt the walls of the house closing in on him. The air had grown thick, the temperature dropping with each turn of the page. The whispers had become urgent, echoing in his mind. "You've awakened it." His heart raced as he looked around, the room now seeming smaller, darker, filled with shadows that weren't there before. A low, guttural scraping sound filled the space, coming from somewhere beneath him. He stood up suddenly, his legs unsteady, and turned toward the door, but before he could reach it, the scraping grew louder, more insistent. The floor beneath him groaned as if something large was moving below. Lucas hesitated. His gut told him to leave, to run. But the book and the mysteries it contained had a hold on him. He approached the edge of the room, staring at the floorboards, which seemed to pulse with a faint, unnatural light. The scraping noise reached a fever pitch, and then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas' breathing quickened, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. Then, just as quickly as it had ceased, the house came alive again. The walls groaned, the floor beneath him creaked, and the air grew heavier, suffocating him. He felt the undeniable urge to look down at the floor, his eyes drawn to a faint crack in the boards, where the strange light seemed to bleed through. Lucas dropped to his knees, fingers trembling as he pried at the boards, pulling them apart with a force he didn't know he had. Beneath the wood, a dark hole awaited, its depth unfathomable. With no other choice, Lucas lowered himself into the hole, his heart pounding in his chest as he descended into whatever lay below. The further Lucas descended, the colder it became. His hands ached as he gripped the jagged edges of the hole, every movement a struggle against the tightening space. The whispers had turned into urgent, guttural voices now, and they seemed to be coming from all around him. "You shouldn't have come," one of them hissed. "We are bound by blood." His eyes strained against the darkness, but all he could see were the faint outlines of stone walls, slick with moisture, stretching downward into a cavernous abyss. The air grew thick with the scent of decay. He finally reached the bottom, the ground beneath him soft and damp, like he had stepped onto something alive. Lucas stumbled forward, his heart racing as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The only sound now was his own breath, ragged and shallow, and the low hum of the house vibrating beneath his feet. The ground beneath Lucas' feet trembled as the voices began to chant in unison, a low, ancient language that filled his mind with visions, horrific, twisted images that made his stomach churn. He couldn't make sense of the words, but the meaning was clear. The house was alive, and it had been waiting for someone to come. Lucas staggered back, his eyes wide with terror. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. The weight of the book in his pocket seemed to grow heavier, as if it was drawing him deeper into the heart of the house. He looked around the cavern for any sign of escape, but the walls seemed to pulse, breathing in time with the house heartbeat. Then he noticed something in the center of the room, a stone pedestal, worn by time. On it, a small dark object sat, gleaming with a faint, eerie light. The object on the pedestal was small, no larger than the palm of Lucas' hand, but it pulsed with an eerie light. He approached it cautiously, his heart hammering in his chest as the chanting grew louder in his ears. Every step he took seemed to make the ground beneath him shake, a deep, reverberating hum that felt like it was coming from the very core of the house. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold surface of the object. The moment he touched it, the world seemed to shift. The light flared, and the chanting stopped. The walls around him seemed to dissolve into blackness, and Lucas felt himself falling, plummeting into an endless void. His stomach lurched, and for a brief moment he thought he might lose consciousness. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation stopped. The ground beneath him was solid again, but everything else was different. Lucas blinked, disoriented. The cavern was gone, replaced by a completely different space, a hallway, long and narrow, lined with doors on either side. The air was thick, suffocating, and there was an overwhelming sense of wrongness, as if the very fabric of the world had been distorted. His footsteps echoed in the narrow corridor as he moved forward, his mind racing. The object in his hand was still glowing, its warmth spreading through his fingers. He looked down, noticing that his body felt different. He no longer felt the same weight on his chest, the same dread gnawing at his insides. Instead, there was a strange sense of calm, as if the darkness of the house had wrapped him in its embrace. But the peace was fleeting. He could hear something. Footsteps, not his own, echoing from behind him. He turned, but there was nothing. Just the empty hallway stretching endlessly in both directions. The footsteps behind him grew louder, closer. Panic rose in Lucas' throat as he quickened his pace. He could feel a presence, something following him, its breath hot on the back of his neck. He whipped around again, but still, there was nothing. The hallway stretched on, unchanging, like it was never going to end. He reached for the first door to his left, his hand trembling as he gripped the handle and yanked it open. Inside, the room was pitch black, save for a single candle in the center of the floor, its flame flickering wildly. The door slammed shut behind him, trapping him in the darkness. His heart pounded as the flames sputtered, casting strange shadows against the walls. A low voice whispered from the shadows, too faint to understand, but the words were unmistakable. "You're not supposed to be here." The voice seemed to come from every corner of the room, its presence suffocating. Lucas' breath was shallow as he stepped closer to the candle, the flickering light illuminating his shaking hands. The shadows danced along the walls, twisting into shapes that seemed to reach out to him. He couldn't make sense of it, none of this made sense. The house, the whispers, the object, everything felt like a twisted dream. He reached for the candle, the flame jumping higher as his fingers brushed against the wick. The shadows writhed, and for a split second, Lucas thought he saw something in the corner of his vision. A figure standing motionless in the dark. But when he turned to look, it was gone. Panic surged again. "Who are you?" he shouted into the void. The room seemed to answer in a way that made his skin crawl, a faint echoing laugh that reverberated through the walls. The laugh faded, but the darkness remained, heavy and suffocating. Lucas backed away from the candle, his mind racing. What was happening? Was this all in his head, or had he really stepped into another world entirely? He turned toward the door, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the room. His hand found the handle, but before he could open it, the door started to creak slowly shut on its own. "No," Lucas muttered, panic rising in his throat. He shoved against the door with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. The air around him thickened, the shadows growing closer, darker. The whispering voice returned, softer now, but with a chilling finality. "You cannot leave." With a last desperate push, Lucas forced the door open. He stumbled into the hallway again, gasping for air, but the hallway had changed. It was no longer the narrow, familiar corridor. It was wider, darker, and the walls were lined with doors that seemed to watch him. Lucas' heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted down the endless hallway, the walls around him closing in with each passing second. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to move. The whispering voices were back, louder now, an incoherent cacophony that seemed to echo from every corner of the house. He turned a corner and found himself face to face with a new door, one he hadn't seen before. It was different, older, its wood weathered and cracked as though it had been untouched for centuries. Something about it felt familiar, as though it had been waiting for him. Trembling, Lucas reached for the door handle. As his fingers brushed against the cold metal, a shiver ran through his body, and for a moment he hesitated. But the voices, those urgent, frantic whispers, drove him forward. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was unlike anything Lucas had encountered before. It was vast, stretching far beyond the confines of the house, with walls that seemed to stretch into an infinite abyss. The ceiling arched high above him, a network of intricate carvings etched into the stone, glowing faintly with a supernatural light. The floor was covered in old tapestries, their patterns worn with time but still holding an eerie beauty. At the far end of the room stood an altar, ancient and dark, adorned with symbols Lucas didn't recognize. The air was thick with power, as though something vast and otherworldly was alive in the very walls. In the center of the room stood a figure, its back turned toward Lucas. "You shouldn't have come here," a voice said, low and cold. Lucas froze, every muscle in his body tensing. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face that was neither human nor entirely something else. Its eyes were black voids, its skin pale and smooth, and its expression was unreadable. Lucas stood motionless, caught in a trance by its gaze. Couldn't look away. "What are you?" Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. The figure tilted its head, its lips curling into a faint, unsettling smile. "I am the keeper," it replied. "I keep the house, I keep the stories, I keep the souls." The voice echoed in Lucas' mind, filling him with dread. "You're not the first to enter," the figure continued. "Nor will you be the last." An old laugh bubbled up from its throat. "But you're the first to awaken the house, the first to truly see." Lucas stepped backward, his body trembling. The figure's words weighed on him, each one pressing against his chest, making it harder to breathe. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice shaking. The figure's smile widened. "I want nothing," it replied. "The house wants you. It always has." The walls around them began to hum, a low resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through Lucas' very bones. The floor beneath him seemed to shift, and suddenly the room was no longer just a room. It was alive. The walls closed in, the air thickening, and the altar's symbols glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is where it begins," the figure whispered, its voice now a distant echo. "You will be part of the house. You will become its story." Lucas felt a pressure building around him, his chest tightening as if the very air had become thicker, heavier. He stumbled backward, his hand reaching out to the altar for support. As his fingers brushed the stone, the symbols flared with light, and an unbearable force seemed to tear through his mind. Visions flooded his senses. Images of people who had once been here, trapped in the house, their faces twisted in agony. They were all part of it now, bound to the walls, their screams still echoing in the dark. "No!" Lucas cried out, trying to pull away. But it was too late. The house had claimed him. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was the figure smiling one last time. The darkness closed in around Lucas, thick and suffocating. The visions of the souls trapped within the house played out before him like a twisted slideshow. Images of people long forgotten, their screams reverberating in the hollow spaces of the house. He tried to scream, to fight against the grip of the house that was tightening around his chest, but no sound came. His body felt like it was being pulled in every direction, the weight of the house was pressing him deeper into the darkness. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The keeper's voice echoed in his mind, its words repeating over and over. "You are part of the story now. You are one with the house." Desperation surged through Lucas as he fought against the suffocating force, his mind racing. There had to be a way out, some way to break free. But how could he escape when the house itself was pulling him in? Lucas's heart raced as the pressure in the room increased, the walls pulsing in time with the whispers that filled his mind. "You can't escape," they chanted. "You belong here." But Lucas refused to give in. He knew he had to fight. There was something about the book, something that had drawn him here in the first place. It wasn't just a map, it was a key, a way to understand the house's power. His mind flashed back to the moment when he first found it, buried in the dust of the abandoned room. The house was trying to claim him, but he couldn't let it. With trembling hands, Lucas pulled the book from his pocket, the symbols inside glowing brighter than ever. As he opened it, the light from the pages illuminated the room, cutting through the darkness. The book began to hum in Lucas' hands, its power surging with an intensity he had never felt before. The pages flipped on their own, revealing new symbols, new markings, ancient, forgotten knowledge. As the book's light expanded, the walls around him began to tremble, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. It was as if the house itself was trying to resist the book's power. But Lucas held on, his fingers digging into the pages. Aning. Suddenly, the room shattered. The walls crumbled away like dust, and the air grew still. Lucas found himself standing in the middle of an enormous void, surrounded by a swirling mass of dark energy. The house had vanished, leaving him suspended in nothingness. The book's light burned brightly, its glow cutting through the darkness, and for the first time, Lucas felt hope. The dark energy seemed to reach out toward Lucas, tendrils of darkness twisting and curling like serpents, attempting to pull him back into the house. But the book in his hands burned with a blinding light, pushing the shadows away. The figure, the keeper, appeared before him, its face twisted into a mask of fury. "You cannot escape," the keeper screamed, its voice distorted and hollow. "The house is your prison. It will consume you." But Lucas, with a newfound strength, stepped forward. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I will not be part of your story." With a surge of energy, Lucas raised the book high, and the light from its pages grew so bright that it swallowed the darkness whole. The house shook violently, its foundation crumbling as the keeper's form flickered and began to dissolve. The house screamed, its walls crumbling and disintegrating around Lucas as the light from the book tore through the fabric of reality. The keeper's form evaporated completely, its last scream echoing in the void. For a moment, everything was still, the only sound the gentle hum of the book. The darkness that had surrounded Lucas for so long began to recede, fading away like a bad dream. Slowly, the void shifted, and Lucas found himself back in the hallway where it all began. The mansion, now nothing more than a pile of rubble, lay in front of him, its oppressive presence gone. The air was clean, the whispers silenced. He had broken free. But as Lucas took a step forward, he noticed something. The book, now lying still in his hands, had stopped glowing. It was as if it had returned to its original state, no longer a key to the house's power. Yet, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the house's story was far from over. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the ruins of the mansion. Lucas stood motionless, the weight of what had happened pressing heavily on him. The book, once glowing with an otherworldly light, now lay in his hands, unremarkable, its power seemingly drained. Despite his victory, he felt no relief, only a gnawing sense of unease. He had escaped the house, but could he ever truly escape its legacy? The wind whispered through the broken walls, carrying with it a faint echo of the voices that had once surrounded him. "You are part of the story now." The words seemed to follow him, haunting him, reminding him of what he had left behind. Could the house ever truly be destroyed, or was it merely dormant, waiting for someone else to awaken it? Lucas' grip tightened on the book, and for a moment he considered throwing it into the ruins, but something stopped him. Lucas had to know. He needed answers, about the house, about the book, and what it all meant. As he stood there, the wind whispered again, but this time, it wasn't just the wind. From deep within the rubble, something stirred. He wasn't alone. Slowly, Lucas turned to face the source of the noise. At first he saw nothing but the broken pieces of the house. But then, a figure emerged from the shadows. Vague, blurry at first, but growing clearer. It was a person, their form shifting like a specter, their face obscured by a dark veil. The figure stepped forward, and Lucas instinctively took a step back. The figure was no ghost, but someone, or something, alive, yet not entirely. "You're still here," the figure said, its voice low and hollow, like a voice coming from deep within the earth. Lucas' heart skipped a beat. The figure stepped closer, its face still hidden beneath the veil, but there was something unsettling about it, something familiar. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling. The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering his question. "I am what remains," it replied, its voice echoing unnervingly. "I was once part of the house, a part of its story. Now, I am the house." Lucas felt a chill crawl up his spine. The house had never truly been destroyed. It had just shifted, taken on new forms. "You weren't supposed to survive," the figure continued, its eyes dark and empty, locking onto Lucas. "But now that you have, you are part of us, part of this story." Lucas took another step back, his hands shaking. The book burned in his pocket, its presence a reminder of the power still lurking beneath the surface. The figure reached up, pulling back its veil. Lucas recoiled at the sight of its face, An impossibly smooth, pale visage, but with no features, only a blank, expressionless surface. "You think you've escaped," the figure said, its voice now a hollow whisper. "But you can never escape the story." Lucas' mind reeled. "What do you mean? What story?" The figure's blank eyes shifted, its mouth stretching into a slow, disturbing smile. "The house's story has no end," it said softly. "It continues with every soul it traps. You are now one of its pages, Lucas, forever part of its twisted history." Lucas stumbled back, his mind unable to process the full weight of the words. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Was this truly the end? Had he merely become a new chapter in the house's endless cycle of torment? A wave of dread washed over Lucas. The house had never been truly defeated. It had only shifted, merged with the souls it had trapped. And now, it had claimed him too. The figure began to step closer, its movements fluid, unnatural. "You were never meant to escape," it whispered. "You are already part of the house." The ground beneath Lucas trembled, and he could feel the pull, the same magnetic force that had drawn him into the house in the first place. He looked down at the book in his hand, its pages glowing faintly once more. The power it had once held was returning, and Lucas felt the oppressive weight of its control creeping back into his mind. But just as quickly, something deep inside him snapped. No. He refused to be another trapped soul, another page in the house's cursed story. He raised the book high, his body shaking with the force of his determination. Lucas' heart raced as he stood before the figure, the glowing book held firmly in his hands. The house's power was surging within him, pressing down like a weight he couldn't escape. But the figure, no, the house itself, was wrong. The twisted reality that it had created, the endless cycle of torment, couldn't be allowed to continue. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The book's light pulsed again, brighter now, as if responding to his determination. "I won't be your story," he whispered, the words more for himself than for the figure in front of him. The figure's smile widened, its features shifting into something even more unsettling. "You cannot break free. The story is already written," it said, its voice cold and final. But Lucas knew something the house didn't. He still had a choice. He could still fight back. The ground trembled beneath Lucas' feet as the house's power surged, filling the air with a deafening hum. The book in his hands began to vibrate, its light blinding as it resonated with the energy of the house. He felt his mind begin to unravel, the weight of countless souls pressing down on him. They whispered, their voices rising in a chorus, all trying to pull him back into the cycle. "Join us, Lucas," they begged. "Become part of the story." But Lucas could hear something deeper, something that wasn't just the house's power, but his own will, his own defiance. The book's light grew brighter still, its glow overpowering the darkness around him. "No," Lucas said again, this time louder, his voice filled with a newfound strength. "I will not be part of your endless story." As the house's power raged against him, Lucas pushed forward, the book held high. The light from the pages was now so intense that it seemed to burn away the very air around him. The figure, once towering and commanding, began to recoil, its form flickering like a fading shadow. The walls of the house trembled, cracking and splitting, as if the foundation of the entire structure was coming undone. Lucas could feel the shift in the air. The house was weakening. It was fighting back, but the light from the book was stronger now. The whispers turned to screams, the trapped souls angry at being torn from the house's grasp. Lucas closed his eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the power within him, the power of his choice, his freedom. He thrust the book forward, releasing all of his strength into it. There was a deafening crash as the walls of the mansion shattered, the entire structure groaning as it collapsed into dust. The figure vanished, its form dissolving into the air, as the light from the book reached its peak. For a moment, everything was silent, an eerie calm settling over the ruins. Lucas stood alone amidst the rubble, his chest heaving with the effort, the book's glow finally dimming. The house was gone. The oppressive weight that had once filled the air was lifted. The air was clean, the whispers gone, and the sun shone down brightly, casting away the darkness that had swallowed him for so long. But even as he breathed a sigh of relief, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered in the air, something unfinished. Lucas turned away from the ruins, the weight of his victory settling over him. The house had been destroyed, its power, its stories, all shattered. He had made his choice, and he had freed himself from its grip. But as he walked away, the faintest of whispers reached his ears, almost imperceptible, like the last remnants of the house's voice, lingering in the wind. "You may have escaped, but the house never forgets." Lucas stopped, his heart pounding again. The book in his hand grew warm, its glow returning ever so faintly, as if alive. He glanced back at the crumbled ruins. Was it truly over? Or had the house merely entered another phase, waiting for another soul to awaken it? For now, Lucas had won. But he knew that the story of the house was far from finished. He could only hope that, for a time, the house would rest.